Their glory can never fade. The legacy of the Harlem Hellfighters. Since the founding of this nation, there has been a strong tradition of African Americans fighting for this country. From the legacy of the 54th Massachusetts in the Civil War, to the Buffalo Soldiers during the Indian Wars of the late 19th century, through the Vietnam conflict, Americans of African descent have participated in every major conflict. A defining moment in the advancement of the African American soldier came in World War I. It was a small regiment from New York State called the 369th Infantry Regiment, which helped foster awareness and recognition of their courage, valor, and patriotism in this call of duty. The 15th New York National Guard, based out of Harlem, was the first African American National Guard regiment in New York. After training in South Carolina and facing racial discrimination, the regiment was moved to France to continue training and to join the French Army to bolster their dwindling troop numbers. The 15th was designated as the 369th Infantry Regiment. The 369th would later be nicknamed the Harlem Hellfighters by the German Army and was one of the longest-serving and most highly decorated regiments of World War I. Musical influence became an important legacy of the 369th's time in World War I. Lieutenant James Reese Europe, bandmaster of the regimental band, along with drum major Noble Sissel, recruited African American and Puerto Rican musicians for the 369th band. Traveling around France, they performed jazz and ragtime songs to soldiers at hospitals and to civilians at military outposts.
The audience could take it no longer. The jazz germ hit them, and it seemed to find the vital spot, loosening all muscles and causing what is known in America as an eagle rocking pit.
This band gained widespread notoriety and influenced the development of jazz music. The 369th were in combat for 191 days, but it was one battle which caught the attention of a nation. On the night of May 14, 1918, Henry Johnson, a private from Albany, New York, and his fellow soldier Needham Roberts were ambushed by Germans while on patrol in No Man's Land, an area between the two sides' trenches. The ensuing battle defined the tenacity of the regiment. Roberts was severely wounded initially, leaving Johnson to fight off the Germans with only a few grenades, a broken rifle, and a bolo knife. In the end, Johnson saved Roberts, fought off an entire German patrol, and survived despite being severely wounded. For his bravery, Johnson was awarded the Croix de Guerre avec Palme. On February 13, 1919, the decorated 369th returned home to New York City, and 4 days later they marched up Fifth Avenue into Harlem during a homecoming parade. "100 years after the end of World War I, the influence of the 369th can still be felt in music, art, and military traditions in the African American community. Although James Reese Europe tragically died months after the 369th paraded down Fifth Avenue, his musical achievements lived on and influenced the Harlem Renaissance. Musicians in his band continued to find success after the war, including Noble Sissel, best known for his Broadway play Shuffle Along and his hit song I'm Just Wild About Harry, as well as famous Puerto Rican composer Rafael Hernandez, who established his own distinct Latin sound after the war.
The 369th Veterans Association Incorporated is a 501c19 nonprofit organization chartered by United States Congress, established in 1953 by a group of World War II 369th Air Defense Artillery soldiers. The role of our members are to preserve the legacy and spirit of Sergeant Henry Johnson and the 369th Regiment by using the heroic actions of these men to instill pride in our youth and communities in which we serve.
The 369th's continued influence on musicians throughout the world is continued to be preserved through the efforts of City Lore. As the Armory goes through renovations and the 369th Regiment Historical Society has had to find a temporary home, City Lore has become a home for the sheet music archive and has begun scanning it as a way to preserve this history and make it accessible. In this effort, we have worked with jazz musician Bobby Sanabria, as we have been especially concerned to recognize the Puerto Rican component of the regiment's history, as Puerto Rican and Latino influences regularly get ignored or become a footnote in U.S. history.
The 369th's influence on musicians throughout the world is preserved through the efforts of individuals like Stephanie Neal and the 369th Experience.
Through the 369th Experience, several educational programs are planned for students from grades K through 12, college students, and for the general public. This history will be shared with students of all ages in libraries and museums across the nation through the study of historical accounts in literature, poetry, and a unique musical experience reenacting the historic 369th Infantry Regimental Marching Band.
By bringing together African American musicians from colleges all over the United States, Neal is continuing the legacy of the 369th for future generations to come. From the battlefields of France to the concert halls and clubs of New York City, the 369th's legacy continues to inspire and enrich future generations from all around the world.
And Jim York always believed, and his whole future was depend upon someday being able to pour forth the soul of the Negro in a cultural level of music that he hoped the Negro musician would in the years to come, the time to come, and those who had already been prepared and were ready to come in to develop the writers and the arrangers and leave this rich heritage behind.
What's the time? 9, all in line. All right, boys, now take it slow. Are you ready? Eddie, very good, Eddie. Over the top, let's go. Quiet, else it's caught a riot. Keep your proper distance, all along. Cover, mother, and when you see me hover, obey my orders and you won't go wrong.